So where we are now is the Choeung, and I'm just pronouncing it my way, Choeung, second word EK, killing fields. Diagram of where we'll be. Hopefully inside there's some literature in English. Okay, where we are, to put it in synoptic form, is the equivalent of the Auschwitz and the second camp at Auschwitz, and where Pol Pot and his scum of the Khmer Rouge regime brought people specifically to be executed. The torturing took place in a site we'll go to later on today. There's no nice way to put this kind of sight or experience. It all ended in 1998. It is ironical that this sign might be necessary because there are people who might not show respect. And here are the skulls of some of those who were slaughtered. And these are the clothes that remain. How interesting and how ironical that this same kind of exhibit is at Auschwitz and probably all the other Nazi concentration camps. Notice the similarity of those striped clothing to the Nazi camp clothing. There's something eerie about looking into the faces, if you will, of these skulls. Fortunately, because they're old and dirty, because they were entombed in dirt pits, they appear as just skulls. But let's look at one. This one. Who was this? Man? Woman? What was their life? What did they dream of before Pol Pot regime, the end of the Vietnam War? What were their hopes? If they had children, what were the hopes of their children before this day that they arrived here? Remember these hollow eyes that look out at the camera. Once held a vision of the world they lived in. Their brains kept those memories. They had a dream of the future. We try to imagine in the moments when we have the courage what the people on the 9/11 planes felt when they may have known they were going to be crashed into buildings or not. They knew something was terribly, horribly wrong. What level of fear? How would we measure that? What was the level of fear in this human's skull casing that we're looking at when they knew they were coming here from the place they'd been tortured and slowly coming here to die? Notice there's some road shackles. Most of us live our lives denying that we'll die and being able to have that luxury. We just know it'll happen and we don't think too much about it. What would you do if you knew it was going to happen? What were your thoughts? This is apparently the first stop for us, and the first of the last for them.
So everybody have to work without question. So you know what happened to the high epitaph or anybody who not work in the right field?
And on this site, the executioner's working office. Here was the place where executioners stationed permanently at Choeung worked. The office as well as the killing fields were equipped with electric power, which enabled them to conduct executions and to read and sign the rosters that accompanied the victims to the site at the night time. Remember that the Pol Pot were as efficient, perhaps almost as the Germans, at least they aspired to be, in keeping accurate records and photographs of each of the victims when they entered the school that we'll see earlier in town, and therefore processing them here. Small consolation for the dead. Sad reminder for the living Cambodians, and hopefully a profound reminder for the rest of us who really hold the power on this earth. I'll try to summarize this. They allude to and allege that the execution methods here were more brutal and atrocious than that of the Nazis, and perhaps because, unlike the Nazis who tried to make it as mechanized as possible, here the killing was done with canes, bamboo stumps, or the heads of hoes, knives, swords, anything at all that they could use to kill people. And it was done not just as a mechanized execution, but as something that perhaps gave them a profound pleasure. It alludes here to a horror that was similar for the Nazis, and that is to see their family, children, wives, husbands, brothers, sisters, seized and tightly bound before being taken to the mass grave. And this paragraph synopsizes the goal that they had and the method they used. They had burnt the marketplace, abolished the monetary system, eliminated books of rules and principles of national culture, destroyed schools, hospitals, pagodas, and beautiful monuments such as Angkor Wat Temple. So my reflections of what they're saying is that the goal of Pol Pot was to convert the populace into mindless robots who provided the infrastructure and the labor for his regime to exist in the form he intended to exist. And we can look at any dictator. What that ultimately means is those at the top have the best and the most. Here a drawing probably by someone who somehow survived. Some foreigners were involved in being killed. Here an Australian. Here's a graphic of the area we're at. Number 1 is the former prison, or the waiting room for death. Number 2, warehouse for chemical products. 3, former site for manacles. 4 is a former kiosk for what it doesn't say. 5, mass graves of naked women and baby skulls. 6, mass graves of 400 victims. Number 7, mass graves of 166 huddled victims, seems to say. The graves that have been executed are the ones that are in solid line. That boundary that's marked in dotted line are areas not yet excavated. I mean, at what point does that become, unfortunately, terribly redundant and useless? What to me begins to match this atrocity, not match it, but certainly parrot it, is the fact that the current regime since 1998 has not yet prosecuted successfully those who were involved in this. Unimaginable to me. Talk about a worthless United Nations and any other organization that purports to go after international criminals. When I visit sites like this in Auschwitz and all the rest, my lack of respect for the intelligence of the do-gooders, the peaceniks, the anti-war, the anti-nuke people just grows at geometric rate. They simply cannot understand. Blunt, in my opinion, that level of denial in the midst of overwhelming evidence is criminal, morally criminal. And it's on this spot that the killing tool storage room was. Left to our own imagination, dropped on this site with no knowledge of what it was, except that it had something to do with the war, we would just assume it was bomb parked, like that site at Normandy. It still remains as it was left. And here you can make out the remains, just barely, of the bones, calcium. There's a bitter and poignant irony in what I'll pan through now. Before 1975, when the ultra-communist Khmer Rouge took over power from the Khmer Republic, Choeung was a long orchard where mostly trees like the ones that I'm panning through right now. So compare this to the horror of what took place after that and what was left to fertilize the ground then. There's a walkway that appears to go around the site, so I'm walking it. To the right, outside the fence, are current rice paddies. Where there's water, rice can always be grown, apparently. And to the left is what looks like a moat if we were at a temple site that has been filled in with a little bit of water and these water lily plants. There's a pleasant breeze as I walk through this shaded area, and perhaps its purpose was to provide an opportunity for people to wander and reflect on what they had experienced, on what lay in the ground nearby. When you read the first few chapters of The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, when you read about Pol Pot and people like Saddam Hussein and other of that scummy ilk, you have to ask yourself, what is it? What is it about either the human mind of the young and of older, but mostly the young, that they can be so easily, in sufficient numbers, induced to buy into such a horrifying and rapacious philosophy and ideology that they can perpetuate this kind of history? Here, people like this young man and then kids will hang out and simply ask foreigners for money, ask for $1. And some foreigners, like the French, giving candy to kids, promote this kind of behavior, turn some of these people into nothing but beggars. I think it's wonderful in one way that people like Chris and Scott Coates come to Cambodia, Siem Reap, and help the people. And they can see over time measurable change. And that's good. But if there's any fantasy in their mind that they're somehow going to raise these people out of third world status, it is not going to happen, in my opinion. It is not going to happen. Maybe in science fiction, if energy became absolutely without end and abundance and absolutely free, maybe there'd be a chance. But I doubt it even then. Look at that gorgeous butterfly. Okay, we're going to walk back through these excavation pits. According to the diagram, that seemed to me, if I recall correctly, off to our left should be a large area that has not yet been excavated, but that's where the pond is, so I don't understand the graphic, but that's not really terribly material. I don't know if the victims ever saw these pits, as opposed to the Germans, who are often the people were led to the edge of the pits, could look down on the dead, writhing, half-dead bodies beneath them, know that they were shortly to be there, and then start hearing the rifle shots, or the pistol shots, as they were systematically killed. This was called a magic tree. Don't know why it was, but it was a tree that was used as a tool to hang a loudspeaker from which sound issued during executions to drown out the moan of the victims while they were being executed. Hey, we're looking at something that's very pretty. And this is
It's
more...
Bangkok area. It is smaller than this one, but now it's just small water now. Take a set from the front and put down there. And next time they will close the castle or something down there and they close.
But
around here next door one place is one down there. One more place stop.
okay. But to my right was a foul-smelling chemical that was almost like a river going into this water system somewhere. So Lucky says that whatever's grown in here, the water is so bad it's probably not good. What this product's used for, I haven't a clue. Don't see many of these around. Don't know whether these numbers on the walls were from the school years or from the Khmer Rouge years. But this is one of the classrooms. Here's a discussion of why it's taken over 30 years to bring the former leaders of the Khmer Rouge to justice. One is that the People's Republic of Cambodia, PRK, was supported by Vietnam, and China, a backer of the Khmer Rouge, Thailand fearful of Vietnam troops, and the United States in the Cold War and just over after the defeat in Vietnam conspired not just to isolate the PRK regime, but to help the Khmer Rouge. So those countries allied, together, helped to the Khmer Rouge to regroup and rearm. Remarkably, in 1970, the United Nations sanctioned a seat in the UN to the Khmer Rouge. In 1993, the UN sponsored an election in Cambodia which the Khmer Rouge boycotted and continued armed struggle. The United States and other international countries demanded a tribunal, and as a reconciliation vehicle, some of the higher-ups of the Khmer Rouge were allowed to defect to the government. There's a quaint choice of wording. And some, if I understand, are still part of the government today. fingernail removal. This was the artist's roommate. A long bar ran the length where their feet are, just like slaves on a slave ship. And it held them in position. This is how they lived. You could make out the shackles and the bar running the full length from up here all the way down to here. Here are some of the instruments of torture. We can only imagine how some of these are used. Pictures of some of the dead. It's interesting, having been here for only 2 weeks in Cambodia, but a month and a half in Southeast Asia, how familiar some of these faces look, because I've seen faces similar to many of these. Probably for measuring height. Or systematically taking a picture, I hope that's what it was. Yes, you can see how they got the right positioning of the head. All of their arms tied behind their backs. See if you can read the emotion on the face. Fear or defiance? Wonder? Curiosity? Innocence? No mistaking this look. How could he possibly comprehend? These barracks or school buildings were apparently left as monuments to the experience. The irony of blackboards. Here they were subdivided into individual cells. Could the people who built this school have imagined the horror it once contained? The irony of the series of doorways like temples. Clearly not a temple. Subdivisions are in wood. For what reason, I don't know. As a student whose row was probably identified as either 11 or 10, could you have imagined this use? These rooms would have been used for mass detainments. Probably those holes would have been for drainage. And perhaps these holes. All these made from rebar. Don't know whether these were somewhat remained when the Khmer Rouge was finally overthrown. This is fascinating because in so many places, including, I believe, Auschwitz, are the rows and rows of the photographs that the Germans took in their anal record keeping. Aren't all lies cloaked in the same language? Are these original exercise devices or torture devices? That's the one they hung people from, upside down, and then dumped their heads into the water tanks. Haven't a clue what the significance, if anything, is of this bed. This looks like perhaps an original kind of blackboard used in the school. My guess is that these rooms that had beds were just used for torture of some sort. Or to keep a specific prisoner. So to be cynical, when the government of Cambodia, the other international governments, including the United Nations, as well as by default the people of Cambodia, although granted they don't have much power, are willing to let the perpetrators of this that still exist go away literally scot-free. Why do we lament? Except for the poor innocent ones who died. So where I am at is the lower right-hand corner of that lake that you see there in the middle, or in the upper left, I guess. And as near as I can tell, the closest you can get to the lake, at least around here, is to go to the lake, on the lake guest house, and walk probably about almost a half a block through the guest house till you finally get to a very nice restaurant, and then you get to what looks like a pond out front, because now they're filling in the center part of the lake apparently, so that's all you can see.